All right, welcome everyone to the final installment of our ClinGen Clinical Genomics Career Panel series. I'm going to share my screen. I just have a few introductory slides. Let me put this into slideshow. All right, so my name is Erin Riggs. I'm a genetic counselor and associate professor at the Geisinger Autism and Developmental Medicine Institute, and it is my pleasure to moderate the final installment of our career series, the installment focused on stepping stone opportunities. So just as a reminder, hopefully you've been able to attend all of our previous webinars, but if you have not, all of the previous ones are available on our YouTube channel. If you scan this QR code, it will take you there and you'll be able to listen into those. Today's installment, as we have mentioned before, is going to be recorded, and that should be available likely by the end of the week. So what is a stepping stone opportunity? So we kind of put this particular panel together to highlight some of the roles that have helped individuals gain experience and knowledge before going on to further education and then eventually other jobs. And some examples of this could include things like genetic counseling assistants, biocurators, research assistants, etc. And if you have attended before, hopefully you remember this, but just some logistics. Thank you for anyone who has provided questions in advance. We do have those noted. But if you think of a new question during the webinar today, please don't hesitate to put it into the Q&A box. If someone puts a question that you are also interested in, you can feel free to upvote that. And I will be monitoring those and I'll be asking those as they come in. Before we get started with our panelists, let's go ahead and do a quick poll to see who is on the line with us today. And has that poll gone on? I don't see it on my end.
No, I don't see it. Hold on one second.
There it is. Okay. So again, just a quick poll asking, as of September 2024, will you be a student and what kind of student will you be? And then how familiar are you with stepping stone career opportunities? So I'll give you a moment. All right, so for today's call, we've got about 33% of attendees are going to be undergraduate students in the fall, about 25% will be master's students, 17% will be PhD students, and we do have about 25% of people who are not currently students. So keep that in mind, panelists, as you are making your comments today. Oops, sorry. And with that, I can introduce you to our panelists for today. So we will be joined by Amanda Gerard, Ryan Webb, Allison Searcy, Grace Leon Lozano, and Matthew Ponticello. I will ask each of you to introduce yourselves more formally. Let us know kind of where you are now, where you are in your journey towards your eventual career, and kind of what stepping stone opportunity you pursued in order to lead you there. And one final logistical note, we do have a lot of questions and not that much time. So if you don't feel like you're obligated to answer every single question, if someone else has already said something similar to what you're thinking, you don't need to necessarily reiterate, but if you have something you'd like to add, always feel free. So I will stop sharing and I will turn it over to Amanda.
Hi, everyone. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay, great. So hi, I'm Amanda. I am a rising second-year medical student at Yale. And before being a student, I was a biocurator with ClinGen for 2 years. So that was my stepping stone opportunity, and it was great. I think that is the questions that you asked, so I think I can pass it to the next person.
Perfect. Let's go to Ryan.
Hey everyone, I'm Ryan Webb. I'm currently a clinical genomic research coordinator at the Broad Institute of MIT and Harvard for ClinGen. my stepping stone opportunity was similarly to Amanda, a biocurator role. And I'm currently, in addition to my role with ClinGen, still working towards a master's in data science and more specifically AI and machine learning.
All right, Allison.
My name is Allison. I am currently a project coordinator for the MyCode Genetic Genomic Screening and Counseling project here at Geisinger. I got into this role through being a genetic counseling assistant. And this fall, I am headed to graduate school to get a master's in genetic counseling. So kind of this role at MyCode has been stepping stone opportunity in the form of kind of multiple roles.
Excellent. And Grace?
Hi everyone, my name is Grace Del Lozano. Similar to Ryan and Amanda, my stepping stone opportunity was being a biocurator for ClinGen at the biocuration core at UNC, and I'm currently a dissemination implementation postbac fellow for their age-based genomic screening project that is going on at UNC currently.
All right, and Matthew.
Hi everyone, my name is Matt. I also go to Yale like Amanda. I just finished my first 2 years of med school and now I'm going into my PhD because I'm going to join MD PhD program. My PhD will be in epidemiology and global health, and my stepping stone position was being a research associate at the Weill Cornell Center for Global Health.
All right, thank you. Now, I know some of you have very similar stepping stone opportunities, but if people could take a moment to say how they heard about those, where did you even hear that such things existed? How did you get to find those positions?
Yeah, I can go first. I find mine a little interesting. I actually found about my position through Twitter. Right after I applied to genetic counseling school, went through the interview process, but wasn't selected in the first year, and mostly because of my lack of experience in genetics and genomic medicine. So I took that as a turning point for me and just started looking at what opportunities are there for me to be exposed to genetics and genomic medicine. And then just scrolling through Twitter, I followed a bunch of different accounts and I found a hybrid position being offered at UNC. They were looking for interns, and I took it as an opportunity to kind of go for it. Didn't think I'd get it. I was an adjunct lecturer at the time, teaching parasitology and other subjects. And then 4 months later, I got the notification that I was accepted.
And can I just ask you a follow-up question before anyone else? So did you live in the UNC area? Like, how did you strategize who to follow on Twitter? Did you follow local groups or just general groups with?
Like general groups, HG, I felt like all the different acronyms that are out there, but a lot of different like Genomic Alliance, like a lot of organizations that I knew did presentations and were putting out resources to kind of just stay updated with what was going on. And somewhere out of the blue, I was scrolling one night and I saw a position open and I applied. And I live in Miami, Florida at the time, so it was just like a really great opportunity for me to kind of expand and kind of go out from my realm.
I could talk about mine next. Mine also is a little bit unconventional. I went to undergrad Cornell, which is in upstate New York, and then there's Weill Cornell Medicine, which is in New York City. And I took a class where once a week, faculty from Weill Cornell, New York City came and gave a guest lecture on global health. And I actually just emailed my former PI that I thought her research was super cool. And she was just like, I would love to have you on my team and help me out. And eventually she offered me a full-time job after working with her like for a year informally.
So somewhat similar to Grace, I was interested in the genetic counseling field. I was coming from a very different career field in environmental nonprofits and became interested in the genetic counseling field, but knew I needed to get some exposure to the field before doing so, as I had a very different undergrad degree. So I was searching for genetic counseling assistant roles to get involved in it, and just threw out a really wide net. And I really appreciated kind of this role had a lot of research and public health aspects to it that I really liked when I was applying.
And one thing I'll add just to piggyback off of what you said, genetic counseling assistant, that is a relatively new and relatively specific stepping stone opportunity. So if anybody on the call is interested in that, like those are good search terms to use. Would you agree, Allison? Or like how else did you come across that specifically?
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. And I would also say that it's an absolutely not necessary role in order to pursue the field of genetic counseling. It's by no means a requisite. But I discovered the field through looking at online kind of what career is best for me, personality, all the things. And I was speaking to a lot of people in the field, and they said, if you want exposure, this is a kind of a great role to do it. So genetic counseling assistant, I think some roles are also labeled as research assistant, clinical research assistant, kind of things in those realms.
And Amanda and Ryan, you came to us around the same time in a similar role. Did you find us different ways or similar ways?
I think we did slightly differently. I'll go first in that I was definitely interested in clinical genetics or precision medicine and genetic medicine, but didn't really know, I guess, what that meant or what roles were out there. And stumbled upon the Broad Institute before ClinGen actually, and they have an early career researchers program where you can apply to essentially all the labs at the Broad Institute at once. And in doing so, I stumbled upon ClinGen there, since there's a lab here for ClinGen, and ended up feeling like that was the best fit for me within clinical genetics.
Yeah, a little bit of a different story for me. So I actually heard about the biocurator position through my alumni network. In the spring and kind of a little bit in the fall of our senior year, we start getting emails about opportunities that are coming from alumni that are looking for people for their labs and things like that. And I remember seeing an email that was forwarded from the department head from Heidi Rem that kind of was talking a little bit about the position and hitting some of the buzzwords. Like I know I was interested in genetics and I wanted to do research, but it didn't have a job description attached in the flyer, but I was so excited. So I just emailed my CV immediately, and then everyone got the email with like the description, but I know it's just something I was so interested in. So I tried to hop on it as soon as possible, and it ended up working out. So it was actually just through my alumni network.
So so that was a really interesting question. We heard multiple different things. So social media, alumni connections, just good old fashioned reaching out to people that you have met before, searching for specific positions, et cetera. So there are a lot of ways to find these things. So maximize all of them. And sometimes you may have to be creative in what you're looking for in order to find something appropriate. So next I will ask, what kind of things stood out for you from your stepping stone opportunities as like things that you liked the best, either in your day-to-day work or in the overall experience?
I can go first here. Something that drew me to the position and has kind of kept me entertained along the way has been the ability to work with experts from around the world in their respective fields, both researchers and clinicians. And so that's been really exciting to kind of motivate me, and also just on a day-to-day basis, hear from really interesting people that are far along in their careers. And there's also been some opportunity to publish papers with them in their respective fields, which is really exciting. And that's probably what does it for me.
I would say for me, the most exciting parts were like the actual research and work we were doing. I found really inspiring, and I thought nobody was doing the type of global health work that my mentor was doing. And so like that was really special, but then also the amount of responsibility she gave me. Like for example, she would just give me specifics aims pages to write for grants for like R01s, R21s. And for anyone who doesn't know what those are the big NIH grants you apply for that kind of pay the bills and pay everyone's salaries. And I really appreciated the level of trust she had in me and responsibility. And I think that only really happened because we had a very good interpersonal one-on-one relationship.
I really appreciated kind of the iterative aspect of my job. I think there was a lot of folks in there who were stepping stone opportunities, and so there was a lot of room for growth and change. If you had input on a process or questions about a project, it was really well received, and you were able to kind of speak with people on how they came to the decision to form the processes that they did, kind of make informed judgments from there was really a helpful learning experience.
Grace or Amanda, anything you'd like to add?
Well, yeah, I was gonna add on like to similar what to Ryan said and everybody else. I think the amount of exposure I got in my stepping stone opportunity to the different people that I met and the different subjects that I was like shown to, I came into like thinking about genetics with a very like green nuance idea, and like the complexity of it, all that I learned through like the biocuration work, especially getting together, like looking through the literature, reading through the literature, coming up with enough evidence to decide with the expert panel what genes and what diseases we could validate and which ones needed more information, and just really had me thinking about the complexity that really goes into genomic medicine and the promise that it holds, but we still have a good way to go.
Yeah, I don't think I'll be adding too much new things here. But yeah, I had a great time working and collaborating with all of the physicians and researchers in the field, and I loved the international opportunities, and figuring out times for meetings is also interesting to talk about. But also just thinking about how much I was able to learn in the couple of years that I was working with ClinGen. And like looking back on it, you don't realize how much you're absorbing in these like stepping stone opportunities, and how much they can help you in the future, and they can apply to potentially what you're learning further down the line. And I think that's something that I now, after being a little bit away from it, realizing that I enjoyed a lot about that opportunity. And I'm actually really grateful for it, the collaboration and like the actual knowledge and exploring different types of research that I hadn't done before.
Excellent. Now, you are all relatively young and early on in your careers. I know we have several undergraduate students on the line. We do have some high school students who listen in to the recordings. I wonder in the next few questions if we could kind of step back. That we did receive specifically a question about what were you thinking about in high school, and how did you prepare from that point in time? And maybe the answer is I wasn't thinking about anything, and I didn't even start thinking about this till college, and that's fine. But for our younger listeners, what kind of things would you recommend to them if they know they're interested in genetics? What things can they do early on, and then how they can progress through college?
I mean, I think there are opportunities for high school students. For example, I mean, obviously now I do global health, but in high school I was doing RNA biology and axonal repair research, which is very different than what I do now. And I started that my senior spring of high school because we had a senior internship program where they kind of gave you time to just find an internship anywhere. And I think it's harder if you're not near like urban centers to do that. But I think there were research programs when I was in high school too. At like Einstein Medical School had a summer program. Mount Sinai has a volunteer research program for high school students. So there's all sorts of opportunities for high school students if you are interested in research.
I was gonna say, at least for me in high school, I had an idea that I did want to go into medicine. At first, it was I want to be a doctor, and then going into undergrad, I did my undergrad with, I got my degree in biology with a minor in psychology. So I knew that I still wanted to work in the health field, but going to medical school at the time was just starting to seem a little bit difficult with my personal circumstances. So I really had to readjust and reassess exactly what I wanted to do. There's definitely a lot of different opportunities at community colleges nearby. My local university, Florida International, my alma mater, they also had wonderful opportunities for both high school and undergraduate students. But like I said, my personal situation kind of changed, and I had to kind of put myself at a stop and work. And so, but a lot of my actual work was I was a dermatology pathology lab technician. So I work with cancer cells, biopsies. I'd cut them, gross them, prepare them to be microscope slides. And so I knew that I still wanted to work in medicine, but then I realized not lab. I wanted to be more like in front of the person talking to someone. So at the time I did both that and teaching. And so I've had a lot of different jobs before I even got to my stepping stone opportunity. But I feel like they all led me in the right direction, and I was on a timeline. But quickly realize that you don't rush anything. If you know that you're going to work in something and that you want to work in medicine and that's your passion, just continue working at it. And whether you're doing it right after undergrad, going to medical school, or taking a year off, a gap year or two to really figure out what you really want to do, that's okay too. I think that's kind of my advice.
I love that. And I'm just going to basically echo what Grace said. So in high school, I had no interest in genetics. I went to a public school in a rural area. It wasn't really, maybe we had a day of genetics, but it wasn't something I was really aware of. And I had an undergraduate degree in environmental sciences where I really enjoyed my evolutionary biology class. I really loved it. Got me a little bit thinking about genetics, but I was on a different career track. And so just thinking of kind of every opportunity as a learning opportunity, and being able to check in with yourself to see, am I really enjoying this? What am I interested in about this? Do my interests lead me in other directions or further in this direction? And I, like Grace was saying, I took community college courses and online courses recently when I decided I wanted to pursue a different graduate career. So everything is a learning opportunity. If you, I think it's incredible if you're able to get research experience early on in high school, but if you don't count yourself out. It's never too late.
Yeah, I could say something kind of similar to Allison. I wasn't thinking about genetics at all in high school. I think I was only just thinking about moving to college by the time I was around that time, and how to deal with like snow, because I was going from Miami also all the way up to Vermont. So those were the things that were really on my mind at the time. But I would say, like, if you're interested in genetics and you kind of already know it at the high school level, like that's a really big clue. Something that kind of pointed me towards this direction was I knew I liked science and I was trying to explore that more, and I would try this or I'd try a little bit of that, and I would try to notice the things that piqued my interest and not necessarily I was just loving because someone around me was super passionate about it, which is something that happens too. If someone is passionate about something, that like rubs off on you and you want to be passionate about it too. But I was just trying to notice the things that I was independently passionate about and maybe was amplified by someone else, and then trying to seek out opportunities that kind of led into those areas and trying to do research and summer internship, but I wasn't thinking about that until I was already in college. So I'd say, like, if you're on that track already thinking about these things in high school, like that's a really good sign. And I would just continue exploring other aspects of science and maybe seeking out people that are passionate about different kinds of things in science and seeing what you enjoy.
I think everyone covered a lot of what I probably would have said, but similarly, I guess just as reassurance more than anything, if you aren't necessarily doing research yet in high school, I didn't do any kind of research until I think my junior year of college was when I first got into an actual wet lab outside of classes. And so initially I wanted to go to med school, be a doctor. And then I realized that I still wanted to be within the realm of genetic medicine, but not necessarily as a physician. And so I guess my advice would potentially be, if you have a linear path, that's fantastic if you have a specific goal, but also having a broader goal of a field as opposed to a specific position is also fantastic. And it's exciting to be able to explore that. And whether it's in high school, college, post-grad, wherever you are, always reach out to people and ask about where they are, how they got there, and also if there are opportunities for you to jump into labs or different clubs or research opportunities, because most of the time people are willing to accept you with open arms.
Yeah, and I really like the message that I was hearing about, don't feel like, you have to meet certain criteria and only those criteria in order to go into some of these genomic medicine careers. If you are not in an area that already has either a genetics department or someone doing research in genetics, that's okay. You can maximize what you have available to you. If there's at least some kind of medical provider in your community, most likely, and you could at least start by trying to reach out to them, at least to speak to them if possible. Some of them may have volunteer opportunities, shadowing opportunities, etc. So, I mean, I think the only thing I would add to that is even if you know you're interested in genetics now and maybe you're not in a place where that is readily available to you, work what is available to you. Because even, you know, as Grace mentioned, she worked in dermatology. That's not necessarily genetics, but she still got that experience, that healthcare experience, that lab experience, and that still translates, even if it is not exactly what you think you might want now. And you might fall in love with something else. So try everything that's available to you. We do have a new question from the audience. So as someone who has been a tech for the last 5 years post-college, I feel like my career options are really limited to being a tech. What other job options are available for someone looking to get out of the lab?
So I was actually trying to type up my answer, but as someone who worked in lab, I did work for only a year and a half in the lab setting before I moved on. But at the time, I was also working as an adjunct lecturer, so I was teaching lab skills to students at university level. So I'd suggest maybe if you're into teaching, if that's what you like, that's one possibility, or maybe looking for research positions that can really like work off the lab skills and techniques that you've gained over the past 5 years, maybe in a hospital setting or a university setting, if that's in your area.
There's also the potential to go into like biotech consulting if you have like 5 years of experience. There's tons of like healthcare consultants. There's tons of biotech consultants that I'm sure would love someone who has 5 years of research experience in the field.
I'm not sure what career it is you're looking to kind of move to out of the lab, but if you have the time and capacity, you could test out some volunteer experiences while you're still working in the lab to kind of further develop your skill set in whatever that kind of new direction would be. And that way you can kind of expand your network with that and get some new skills.
As a shameless plug, ClinGen has a volunteer program where people can serve as biocurators like Ryan, Amanda, and Grace have discussed. That can be a good way to see if that's even anything that interests you. Maybe it doesn't. But that's at least one example of a volunteer opportunity like Allison mentioned. Oh, another question. So for the panelists who are biocurators, can you share more about what experiences and skills you leveraged started out in that role and then the skills you gained in that role?
I think as far as skills to get a foot in the door in that role, a lot of that, again, for me, started in undergrad. With classes, big translatable or translational skill was literature review. As a biocurator, you do quite a bit of that. And so I think in those science classes where you have the opportunity, or if there are electives where you could potentially take a class that allows for a lot more of that, I'm being able to really read and digest scientific literature and understand and be able to then turn around and speak to experts in the field about that is a really, really good skill to have. Additionally, if you can get involved, depending on what stage of your either education or career that you're in, if you can have some kind of experience in any kind of lab or research setting, that's definitely helpful so that you can, when you're conducting research with ClinGen, be able to contribute to that. As far as things that I've learned as a biocurator, I think that it's been a really exciting opportunity to learn again from experts, the foremost experts in a lot of their fields, and specifically learn a lot more about clinical genetics and specific disease domains, which has been very interesting. And I think it's cool within ClinGen that everything is pretty interdisciplinary, where there are people that are on this data side of things, they're on the pure research wet lab side of things, people that are physicians and clinicians. And so there's a lot of different experiences, and being able to take from each of those across different disease domains is exciting in whatever you choose to do with ClinGen continuously or beyond ClinGen thereafter.
Yeah, I agree with what Ryan said. And another skill that I really leveraged too was because I had prior teaching experience, being able to do presentations and like develop the way that I present certain scientific material really did help me a lot in my position starting off. So I wasn't scared to give presentations, but the material and the content really relied on my literature skills and my literature review, being able to digest all those complex different papers that you go through and read. So that is definitely something that I appreciate and value from my personal experience as a biocurator and the networking opportunities. Now as a research assistant for the age-based genomic screening project, and I do connect a lot with the community, talking to them about genetics, and so being able to even further digest and make that very complex material into something very simple and digestible to the lay person is super important and valuable to me.
Yeah, I'll echo a lot of what Ryan and Grace have already said, but like Ryan, I started the stepping stone position right after undergrad. So a lot of the skills that I came into it with were coming from my undergrad classes, like being a teaching assistant, so working with people and disseminating knowledge that way, and then like a little bit of literature review from some of those like upper course electives. But I would say to walking away from the opportunity after being a biocurator, like what Grace was saying is I definitely got a lot better at presenting, which is not something that I came into the opportunity with. So I got a lot better at being comfortable talking about science and being able to explain it in a way that other people can understand who haven't necessarily read the source information. So that is something I got a lot more comfortable with, being able to talk to someone who's very well established in the field and have a conversation that gets somewhere with me not being as nervous at the end of the day is also a great skill to have. The networking that comes out of that too. So a lot of leadership skills and organization skills and a lot of literature review. Like I did it a little bit before, but the amount that you do as a biocurator like really sharpens like how you can think critically about a lot of the information because you're going through it very often, and then those skills can transfer between the different like disease domains that I was working with. So kind of learning one skill and being able to apply it in a lot of different aspects is also something that I picked up in the couple of years before starting med school.
Excellent. Now, some of you have sort of alluded to this, but I'll ask outright. Has there ever been any uncertainty about your career decisions, and what helped you decide what was ultimately going to be the right choice?
Speak to this. So I think I've alluded to this in some of my earlier answers, but I have a degree in environmental natural resources and worked at an environmental nonprofit for about 4 years after undergrad. And some circumstances changed, and I decided I needed to switch careers, and I looked into that. And so I had some uncertainty about my career then, and certainly if you allow it, it kind of bleeds into kind of uncertainty currently. But I think what has really helped me is like we were speaking about earlier, is just really taking assessments of where I am and what my interests are, and am I being fulfilled in my current role? What are the things that I'm looking for? Am I finding it here? And if not, kind of what would I like to add in or change to do that? And so in doing that, I really found a career that I feel, it's not perfect 100% of the time, but I really found a place where I'm very comfortable and want to continue pursuing this career. But if at any point, I did make that decision a while ago, I feel it was the right decision to change careers. And it's never a thing to be ashamed of if you do decide that the thing that you put work and time into is no longer serving you and you need to kind of make a switch. That's absolutely okay to do. But yeah, I'm really glad that I made the switch. And yeah, but it's not an easy decision. So want to recognize that too.
I think jumping on top of everything that Allison said there, I feel like uncertainty over career decisions, especially early on, is, at least from the people I talk to, I don't know if that says something about me or not, but it's typically the norm as opposed to being an outlier. And even though that feels really scary because it seems like everyone around you has everything figured out, more often than not, I feel like people evolve throughout their careers and what their interests are, what they want to do, the roles that they hold. And so, as far as having uncertainty over career decisions, absolutely, that is the case for me. And it wasn't until the last year and a half, 2 years, that I realized, now doing the master's in AI, that that's the direction I wanted to take my interest in this field in. And so, Who knows where those interests will lead in another 2 years, if they'll be the same or if I'll look back with regret. Hopefully not, but uncertainty I think is entirely normal and not something to be worried about, but more an opportunity to explore different interests and figure out what makes the most sense for you.
I think for me, I had uncertainty all throughout undergrad and high school. Like, even though it sounds like I had an early start in high school, like at one point I wanted to be a neuroscience major and do a PhD in neuroscience. Then right before applying to MD PhDs, I was like, I want to do a PhD in anthropology. And then I was like just MD. And then I thought through MD PhD, I could do everything or both. And I would say like I'm still sitting in uncertainty. Like I question that I made the wrong decision all the time because like I'm in such a long program. I'm developing like these two very different skill sets by doing like a non-traditional, not basic science PhD and then doing an MD. And I also think it's okay to be uncertain the entire time because I think everything works out. And someone told me once, like, there's no such thing as wrong choices. There's just choices. And then you build your life around it. And that's like how I pursue my career. It's just like, I'm just making a choice and I'm going to go and see what happens.
Yeah, and I guess for me, I did have a lot of uncertainty, especially after I got rejected from genetic counseling school, but that's totally normal. First year, especially first year applicants, I've heard that that happens a lot with genetic counseling. And then I also had uncertainty even in undergrad. I was doing this everything to be a good pre-med student and then didn't even end up being a pre-med student. But I'm not canceling it out. And I think where I am right now is definitely where rejection is redirection. I guess that's what kind of happened for me. And getting rejected from genetic counseling school brought me to my stepping stone opportunity and really just opened so many different doors for me. And the work that I'm doing now is so personally fulfilling. And I love what I do. And I know that it's going to set me for the perfect career path, whatever it may be, moving forward.
Yeah, I would say I also had a decent amount of uncertainty kind of thinking about my career. So similarly, how in high school I wasn't thinking about college. While I was in college, I wasn't putting too much thought to what was going to happen after I graduated. So I didn't even realize that I was interested in medicine until like the endish of my junior year, which if anyone is considering medicine, that's kind of late to even think about shadowing someone. So I was kind of looking for opportunities that gave me some time after graduating to explore some common themes in applying to medicine, like shadowing and doing research and seeing if it was even the career that I wanted to go in. Was bouncing between MD, PhD, maybe a master's, maybe just a PhD. So I was kind of all over the place. But in a good way, it was nice because it let me like think about what I actually wanted to pursue. And I always like think that like anytime I'm uncomfortable, that means that I'm growing in some aspect. So I think even now, like I applied to school and it worked out and I'm here and I'm still uncomfortable because I don't know what I want to go in within medicine because there's so many choices still. So I think there's still going to be a lot of uncertainty in like the career, but you can look back on some of those choices and kind of see that they're pointing you towards different common themes or pointing you away from something. So there's always like a reassurance, like Matt was saying, like there's just choices.
Great, thank you. We've got a couple additional questions coming in from the chat. The first is specifically about ClinGen volunteer opportunity, so I might answer that one myself. So the person is just saying, you know, they've asked to join the volunteers, they're waiting for specific education. Are there any PhD positions associated with ClinGen? So just to clarify, our volunteer program is open to anyone at any stage of learning. So you could be an undergrad, you can have a PhD. We have physicians volunteer with us. We have laboratory directors volunteer with us, genetic counselors, anyone who is interested. We can find something that is appropriate for you to do. Even for our high school students, we have a specific program called Baseline Annotation, which just involves reading papers and annotating important points in the literature for our biocurators to use. So yes, if you have a PhD, you absolutely still can volunteer with us. If you are asking about paid positions, Caitlin, I know you're looking up links in the background. We do actually have a page on our website where when there are job opportunities within ClinGen available, people will post them. Sometimes there are things available, sometimes there are not, but that's a good page to keep an eye on. So if you try to find that and put it in the chat, that would be excellent. The next question is, one of the panelists mentioned taking some online classes and community college courses before going on to master's. I believe that's you, Allison. Which courses did you take?
Yeah, so when I was first considering a career change, I took a genetics course, and this was during peak COVID, so everything was fully online at that point. But I took a genetics course, and then when I decided to go to a master's program, there were some courses that I just hadn't taken in undergrad that I needed to fulfill. So I took developmental psychology and biochemistry through courses. So I think psychology was through a community college, and then biochem wasn't offered at the community college nearby. And so I took that through an online course. I believe it was University of New England online, but there really is a lot of options for kind of distance learning available now. Yeah.
And one thing to mention, one cool thing about having a stepping stone opportunity while, trying to prepare yourself for additional roles, some employers do perhaps reimbursement for these courses, correct, Allison? Like Geisinger does,
That actually, that
perhaps
is,
the Broad does.
yeah, that is a really great
Awesome.
point. That was
About that.
incredibly helpful. Yeah, and eased a lot of that kind of burden of exploring those things. Yeah, while working.
Excellent. All right. Well, I think the next question I'd like to ask you guys is, how did you know it was the right time to move on from your stepping stone opportunity and like you were ready to take the next step?
I'll go first. I think for me, moving on from being a biocurator to essentially a social clinical research assistant, really had to do with the people that I was networking with within the biocuration core at UNC. I liked my work that I did as a biocurator, but again, I really did want to be out in the community, and the age-based genomic screening project that I work for, like I said, it really does fulfill me personally. I work a lot with the Spanish-speaking community. I'm a first-generation Latina, so I grew up a lot with like very little Spanish-speaking resources from my mom. And so a lot of the work that I do has to do with translating this genetic education material, the research material, into Spanish so that it's available and we can create equitable resources to make sure that we're targeting all different demographics in the North Carolina community, so no one's really left out. When I heard about this project, I just knew that just really encompassed all the skills that I've learned up until now, and I was just ready to move on and turn all my efforts into that.
I guess kind of combining the last question and this question, during my role as a biocurator, I was also taking some classes. There were kind of a widespread array of different things, between hopping on different seminars within the genetics realm that were available through ClinGen, but also I took a business course that was basically the equivalent of a minor in business, just out of interest to see if I want to transition to some kind of consulting role, like I think Matthew mentioned earlier. I also then ended up taking some data science introductory courses to see if that was of interest, basically trying to stay anywhere but the wet lab. But that ended up being of interest and turned into now the path that I'm currently taking. I'm still actually with ClinGen in a biocurator role still, but also doing now some data science work, which has been nice because my team's been very accommodating of exploring my interests within the field and exploring now the data science path that I'm starting to take. And so I am continuing to work with them through this year and then into my first year of the program. Starting this fall, I'll still be working part-time with ClinGen. So it's been very accommodating, and that's kind of been the natural progression of my timeline.
I can share my kind of pathway a bit, because I feel like it's a little bit more traditional, maybe, if anyone wants to interpret it that way. But like I mentioned, was kind of going into the stepping stone opportunity to kind of explore what I wanted to do after that. So I kind of went into it giving myself a somewhat self-imposed timeline of those 2 years to kind of explore within science what I wanted to do and start thinking about the next couple of steps. So I gave myself a time frame of 2 years. If I got to the end of the 2 years and I still hadn't figured it out, I think that would have been totally fine and I would have just moved on to the next step or whatever came after that. But I think by giving myself like a little bit more of a restriction on time, it really pushed me to kind of figure out what I wanted to do after the stepping stone opportunity and kind of take those 2 years and do as much as I could in that limited amount of time.
I think for me, part of what motivated me to move on from my stepping stone was like logistics of knowing I have a long road ahead of me. So part of me didn't want to necessarily do a full 2 years of being an RA. I think I did a year and a half of it. And the other thing is that I think I had learned as much as possible as I could at the moment, and I kind of felt that. And I think my mentor gave me the confidence to know I could get into the graduate programs I wanted. She kind of was like, "You are ready, you can do this." And that kind of gave me the little boost I needed to pull the trigger on it and actually go instead of like being reluctant and waiting a year to like build up my CV more or whatever it would have been.
And maybe we can follow up a little bit on that. 'Cause several of you are now in programs that you had to apply to. So maybe could you speak to like, did you have a backup plan if you didn't get in this year, or whatever year you got, what you were gonna do, and how did you come to the realization, and Matthew, you just spoke to it, that you were ready to pull the trigger? Was there any hesitancy? Like, what was that process like actually trying to apply? And then what were you thinking, if I get in, if I don't get in?
So I know Amanda mentioned earlier about how, just kind of being in the uncomfortable spaces. And I feel like that's kind of what the transition was for me, knowing I wanted to go to graduate school, and that was going to be a challenge of, applying and doing all of that. It's all kind of in a comfortable space as opposed to the stepping stone job that I had been in for a few years that I felt kind of very steady and in control of. So I applied, knowing it was competitive and I wasn't sure if I was going to get in. I had kind of toyed with the idea. I don't think there's one right way to kind of go about the process. But I kind of decided that I was going to, for the time period I was applying, that was going to be what I was focused on. And I had a steady, this job that I was in, I was comfortable in. And if I didn't get in, I would stay in that job, and then I would take the time then to reevaluate and move on from what was next. So that was really nice to have kind of a safe place to land, to be in, if this thing I was going for didn't work out the way I thought it was going to. I know not everyone has that opportunity, but that is kind of a nice thing about having a stepping stone job that you're in.
For sure, I'd say as the boss of a stepping stone job, in most cases, your mentor is not going to kick you out. You know what I mean? Like, we love you just as much as, you hopefully love working for us. And if, we will encourage you when, we think you're ready to take the next step. But then if it doesn't work out, we are happy to keep you with us as long as you would like to be with us. So it is kind of a nice thing to have that stability in the background. Which might be a little different experience from people who apply straight out of undergrad. Now, if they don't get in, now they have to kind of start from the beginning and maybe find a stepping stone, which is also fine, but just kind of different sides of the coin.
I would say for me, like I did have plan Bs and things. I applied to MD PhDs knowing they're a little harder to get into. And Yale's the only MD PhD I got into, and I got in off the wait list. So my plan B was to just do an MD and just like really supplement research. And I actually fully committed to an MD program until I got off the wait list at Yale. So I think that speaks to your plan B can work out totally fine as well. And like there's nothing wrong committing to it. Because I was fully prepared to do my plan B and I wasn't mad about it. I was just like, okay, this is how the cards fell.
I would say probably for me, it's similar to what Allison was describing. So I was in the stepping stone opportunity kind of really when I was coming towards my mentors with like the idea of going to grad school. It was like a lot of encouragement, a lot of support. So I felt like sure in making that decision because I was hearing encouragements from multiple different people. And so I guess in that sense, I never had like a fully conceptualized plan B. Like if med school didn't work out, I would probably still be a biocurator and I would be loving being a biocurator. So I kind of had like that as like, I guess a plan C, but I never had like, if med school didn't work out, I would go do a different career kind of plan B. So I was actually really grateful for having the stepping stone, like you were saying earlier, Erin, because it's something that like, if things didn't work out, like I still had a great opportunity and I could still learn more and reassess and reevaluate maybe like my next steps after that. So that's kind of where I landed in the spectrum of things.
I would entirely echo that in that when I took the stepping stone opportunity, it wasn't a stepping stone to get to the next, I guess, finish line, whatever I had in my head. It was so that I could kind of like sit there for a little while to figure out actually what I wanted to do. And I think that's one of the best parts about these opportunities is if you know you have interest in this general field, but you don't exactly know where within the field you want to be, it's a nice opportunity to, with some safety net, like Aaron was saying, in that generally speaking, your mentors are willing to continue to nurture your growth as an individual and within your career. You have some time to figure things out.
All right, we've got a question in the chat about how manageable is it to be a biocurator or GCA or any kind of position with other responsibilities, like if you are taking classes or if you are trying to apply for a program, et cetera, if people could speak to that.
I'm happy to hop in here. I've been a part-time master's student for the last 2 years now, and in September I'm swapping so that I'm going to be a full-time master's student and a part-time uh, research coordinator with ClinGen. And so I think it's entirely up to what you're willing to take on. As far as the role with ClinGen goes, it's definitely accommodating in that, at least again, speaking to my team, their understanding of you having responsibilities so that sometimes if you have an earlier meeting or a later meeting beyond the 9 to 5 stretch, because we work with people all over the globe, you can sometimes cut out earlier or start a little bit later with still keeping to your 40 hours a week. Additionally, I would recommend, I guess, just gauging yourself and your ability to work beyond your 40 hours of work. And if you're able to do multiple classes, that's great. For me, I've just been doing one class per semester, which is kind of 50% time as a student beyond my role with ClinGen. And I'll be switching to 100% with my school next year and 30% with ClinGen. And so it's definitely doable and they're supportive of it. But again, it's up to what you're willing to take on.
And I might just add a point of clarification because as I reread that question, I think there might be one tiny misunderstanding. So Amanda, Ryan, and I believe also Grace, they worked with ClinGen in a paid capacity. This was an actual position called biocurator or research assistant or whatever that is distinct from the volunteer opportunities that we have where you would not be expected to work. If that is a full-time job, the volunteer would be a little more flexible than that. So we do have both, and they are speaking from the paid perspective.
Yeah, and I guess also what kind of what Brian was saying, you have to assess yourself. So how manageable it could be different for everybody. So some people can juggle 3 or 4 things, people can only juggle one. So it really depends on you and being honest with yourself on what you can and cannot manage. So when I came into ClinGen, like Aaron said, I was on a full paid position. So that was my full-time job, but I was transitioning out from being an adjunct lecturer. And there was a point where I thought I can do both. So be a part-time adjunct lecturer and then do full-time biocuration. But I found that eventually I had to stop teaching just because I really wanted to focus in my biocuration position, mostly for my own personal gain and really take a lot from that experience. So cutting my time in half wasn't going to be the best for me. And that's just a decision that I had to make for myself. Some people can do it and that's perfectly fine, but you really have to be honest and say, okay, like I can't do all of it. I don't want to spread myself too thin. And I want to put my full effort into this one thing to make sure I do it correct.
Yeah, just to add on to that, and I would echo everything Ryan and Grace have said so far. It's just, I think it's manageable. I'm not going to say it's the easiest thing in the world because it personally wasn't for me, but it's definitely something that can be done. I know while I was working, I ended up taking one class. I was studying for like the MCAT, the entrance exam, and like doing applications and doing interviews. And ClinGen was really understanding for like interview time because or the whole day for some reason. But it's definitely manageable if you like self-assess, like everyone was saying, and realistically look at how much you can take on and how much bandwidth you have. I know when I was doing like studying and applying, it was just working and studying. And I know that's like the two things that I could handle at the time. So it's really just knowing what you can do and being very realistic with yourself to get the things you want to get done.
All right, we are nearing the end of our hour. Any final pieces of advice that you would just like the people on the line to know, regardless of whether or not it was a question? Any last things you would like to say?
I just did want to mention, I'm not sure if it was spread out through our conversations, but having a good mentor, having a good relationship with the people that you work with is so essential to your growth and development as a professional. Having people on your side, really rooting for you and telling you, kind of like Matthew was saying, like, I'm confident you're going to get in. I'm confident that you can do this. It's time to go on to the next step has been so beneficial for me. A lot of my supervisors have been so supportive, the people that I've worked with in the different expert group panels, especially the CDG. I love them. And they were all very understanding when I moved on. And it's just really important to have good mentors. So finding someone that you resonate with, and sometimes it's not just one, sometimes it's different mentors, and because everyone is going to feel you in a different way. So just keep that in mind.
I would say don't look for a reason to give up. And I would say that like to keep trying over and over and over again, because I just know it's also random. I don't know about applying into genetics, anything. So like I won't pretend to know that. But at least I have friends who applied to med school 3 times, and the first 2 times they didn't get in at all. And then the third time they got into Yale, keeping the same application. So you just have no idea who's reading what. And there's like no good reason to give up. The only reason to give up is if you truly decide I don't want to do this anymore.
I would say that is also true of genetics. Anything else, Amanda, Ryan, Allison? It's okay if you don't.
I guess my parting, I don't know if I'd call it wisdom because I'm not in a place to give any wisdom, but uh, I would recommend just don't be afraid to ask people for help. Most of the time, whether it's just a cold call to ask someone about their career path, or trying to ask someone that you collaborate with, you work with, you learn from about some insight or an opportunity to work with them on something you may be interested in. Most of the time, they're willing to say yes. And even if they can't say yes to you themselves, they can oftentimes redirect you to someone that is willing to steer you in the right path. So just with a smile on your face, don't be afraid to ask.
Yeah, I can go. I guess the one thing I want to say is just keep an open mind. Sometimes you don't realize you're gonna like something until you're exposed to it, and you might not have had that opportunity if you immediately shut it down. So definitely keep an open mind, like lean into those uncomfortable feelings, those feelings of uncertainty. That usually means you're growing in the right direction. And then kind of similar to what Ryan was saying is like, don't be afraid to reach out for help, but also don't be afraid to ask someone how they got to the position that they're in, because not everyone's path is linear, and you can learn a lot about hearing how people got to where they are and potentially learning from the things that they did in their career, or the opportunities that they wanted to do in their career. And there's many different ways to end up in the same position. So you never know what you can learn by asking someone how they got to where they are. And that can maybe inspire you to follow a similar path or get to the same point in a different direction.
All right, well, it is now the top of the hour. I just quickly have 2 last logistical announcements. The first is just reminding you that the recording of today's session will be available hopefully by the end of the week. And then finally, we will be sending you a post-series survey. Please take a moment to fill this out. It really helps us out to plan for next year's event. Tell us what you liked, tell us what you didn't like, but let us know what you thought. So I want to thank all of our panelists. It was lovely to see some of you again, lovely to meet some of you for the first time. Wonderful advice, and I hope everyone has a wonderful day. Thank you.